They thought she was nobody. They were wrong. The chatter inside the Lexington Club buzzed with silk dresses, glittering earrings, and wine glasses clinking to false laughter. It was the annual philanthropy circle dinner night, reserved for the powerful, the polished, and the impossibly proud. And then she walked in. Norah Ellison didn't belong. At least, not in their eyes. Her dress wasn't designer, it was a simple navy sheath she'd worn once to her niece's graduation. No makeup artist had touched her face, and her heels were 2 seasons old. But her back was straight, her chin steady. She walked with the quiet dignity of someone who didn't need to pretend. "Who let the cleaning staff wander into the gala?" someone whispered behind a flute of Prosecco. Laughter followed, sharp and rehearsed. A man in a tuxedo elbowed his friend. No +1 either. Looks like she got lost on her way to the service entrance. At the far end of the ballroom, standing beneath the gold and marble pillars, stood Evelyn Shaw, celebrity event host and head of the Shaw Foundation. She was elegance personified, wrapped in crimson silk, her hair sculpted like a magazine cover. She spotted Norah immediately. "Well, well," Evelyn said, voice carrying just enough to be heard by nearby guests. "Did we open admissions to Civier?" Gasps fluttered. Eyes turned. Norah paused. She could have left. Her heels dug into the carpet like anchors. But she didn't flinch. She walked past Evelyn like the insult hadn't happened. That made it worse. "Excuse me," Evelyn said louder this time, stepping forward. "I assume you're here for, what? Catering? Florals? Or just to sneak a selfie?" "I'm here because I was invited," Norah said quietly, her voice calm. "Of course you were," Evelyn scoffed. "I suppose the board now sends invitations by mistake." A few nervous chuckles echoed. "I'll do you a favor," Evelyn continued. "We're short a speaker tonight. One of our guests of honor cancelled last minute. Since you're already here, why don't you earn that seat and take the stage?" Laughter erupted. Someone clapped sarcastically. The pianist stopped mid-song. It wasn't a suggestion. It was humiliation, served cold in public. For a long second, Norah said nothing. She looked around not with panic, but with something deeper, stillness. Then she nodded once. "All right," she said. "I'll speak." That's when the room really went silent. Evelyn blinked, thrown off by the calm acceptance. "You're what?" "I'll take the mic," Norah said, stepping forward. "But I hope they'll forgive me if I speak from the heart instead of a teleprompter." Evelyn hesitated, unsure if this was mockery or madness. She motioned to the assistant DJ. The mic was handed over. A nobody, a woman in a budget dress, a figure from the margins. And now she stood at the center of the most elite ballroom in New York City, holding a live microphone and facing a sea of smugness and disbelief. Some guests leaned in, expecting a train wreck. Others turned to whisper and snicker. Norah inhaled. And then she began to speak. For a moment, nothing happened. Norah Ellison stood there beneath the gilded chandeliers, microphone in hand, eyes steady. The ballroom was still, caught in a hush that balanced between awkwardness and anticipation. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't thank the host. She didn't joke to ease the tension. She just spoke. "I wasn't born into privilege," she said simply. "No silver spoons, no prep schools, no yachts on weekends. Just a mother who worked 3 jobs and taught me that dignity is never something you wear, it's something you live." Somewhere in the back, a wine glass tilted. A few guests looked at each other, unsure how to react. "I know what you're thinking," Norah continued, her voice calm but unwavering. "What is she doing here? In this dress, with no name tag, no powerful family behind her?" She scanned the room. She wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. Just steady like a current beneath calm water. "I'm here because sometimes, the ones you overlook are the ones who know exactly what matters." You could feel it shift. People straightened in their seats. The laughter died in people's throats. The pianist, off to the side, didn't dare resume. "In rooms like this, people often confuse polish with purpose," Norah said. "But I've spent the last 20 years working with children who don't have lunch money, with veterans who haven't been hugged in a decade, with single parents who barter winter coats for heating bills." Someone near the front leaned forward. It was slight, but noticeable, a ripple. "And you know what I've learned?" she asked, lifting her gaze. "That those people, the forgotten ones, carry more strength in a day than most of us do in a lifetime." She paused, not for effect, but for breath. Real breath. The kind you take when you're not afraid anymore. "I didn't come here to impress you. I came here to remind you." Murmurs. One woman put down her glass and clasped her hands together. A man who had smirked earlier now looked thoughtful. From the side of the ballroom, Evelyn Shaw watched with a frozen smile. Her arms were crossed, but the color had drained slightly from her cheeks. Norah continued, "My name doesn't appear on Forbes. I've never been on the cover of any glossy magazine. But last year, the foundation I built from a shoebox budget helped over 4,000 children learn how to read. We put books in homes that had none. And this week, we opened our first after-school STEM program in a neighborhood most of you wouldn't even drive through." Someone clapped. It was a soft sound at first, from the left side of the room. Then another joined. And another. Norah didn't smile. She didn't bow. She just looked across the audience with eyes that said, "I told you I belonged." "And yes," she added with a gentle lift in her voice, "I walked in alone tonight, but I didn't come empty." That line settled like thunder. Because suddenly somehow she wasn't just standing on a ballroom stage anymore. She was holding up a mirror, and everyone had to look. The applause grew not raucous, not forced. It was the kind that rises slowly, reluctantly, from people who've just realized they misjudged the room and the woman in it. Evelyn turned to one of her assistants. "Who is she?" she hissed under her breath. The assistant fumbled with a tablet, tapping nervously. "Norah Ellison," he whispered, "founder of RisePath Initiative. They're actually on our charity list. I think we invited her as an honorary guest, not staff." Evelyn's face paled, but the microphone was no longer in Norah's hand. She'd already stepped down, returning it to the stunned DJ as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Except everything had. Norah stepped down from the stage, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She didn't need applause. She didn't even look back. But the room couldn't stop looking at her. All the noise, the shallow chatter, the fake smile shad evaporated. What lingered now was awe and confusion. Evelyn Shaw stood still, her fingers tightening around her champagne glass. She tried to smile, tried to brush it off, but the unease was visible. She turned again to her assistant, voice low but desperate. "Why didn't anyone tell me who she was?" The assistant stammered. We assumed you knew. She's been featured in Fortune's Impact List, and The Atlantic did a profile on her last spring." "You mean the article about the woman who built an education empire from her kitchen table?" Evelyn blinked, her tone brittle. "That's her," he said. "She's the founder, the architect, the woman who created the entire RisePath model. The Department of Education is piloting her framework in 12 states next year." Evelyn's expression cracked for the first time. The crowd parted slightly as Norah moved across the room, not seeking attention, but now undeniably the center of it. People she'd never spoken to before nodded respectfully. A few reached out to shake her hand. And then someone stepped forward. A tall man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a navy suit, emerged from the audience. His name was Marcus Hale Executive, board member of the Shaw Foundation, and a notoriously hard man to impress. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice booming with clarity, "but I'd like to formally recognize something." The guests turned again. All eyes snapped to him. "Ladies and gentlemen, we often gather here to honor names we already know. Celebrities, benefactors, old money. But tonight, it seems we've overlooked someone who has done more for underserved youth than any campaign we've funded in 5 years." He turned toward Norah and offered his hand. "Norah Ellison, you're not just welcome here, you represent exactly what we should be celebrating." Applause. This time loud, real. A standing ovation rippled through the ballroom, awkward at first, then complete. Evelyn stood motionless. Her foundation's donor base was now cheering for the woman she tried to humiliate. Her carefully crafted image as a social gatekeeper had collapsed in less than 10 minutes. One of the photographers, sensing the moment, turned from Evelyn and lifted his camera toward Norah. Flash! Another flash. "I'd like to invite you," Marcus continued, "to deliver the keynote at our next Education Summit in DC. It would be an honor." Norah didn't gloat. She didn't gloat because she didn't need to. Power didn't look like Evelyn expected it, wasn't red silk and a gold nameplate. It was steady hands. It was soft-spoken strength. It was showing up alone and leaving the room transformed. She nodded once. "Thank you. I'd be honored." Thinand only thended she glanced toward Evelyn. There was no anger in her face, just clarity. Evelyn, finally realizing the weight of what had happened, walked over slowly, trying to summon a smirk. "Well," she said, "I suppose I owe you an apology. I didn't know." Norah tilted her head slightly. "That's the problem, Evelyn. You didn't want to." Silence. Evelyn's smile faltered, then fell. She stood there, for the first time, without a spotlight, without applause, just exposed. "And Norah?" She turned away, not with malice, but with grace, not with revenge, but with relief. She had nothing to prove. She already had everything that mattered. The applause eventually faded, but something deeper remained. Respect. Not the kind people give because they're told to, but the kind that's earned quietly, unmistakably. Norah Ellison didn't linger for photos. She didn't bask in the attention or circle the room soaking in praise. She simply nodded at Marcus Hale, offered a warm handshake to two young non-profit leaders who had introduced themselves, and slipped toward the exit with the same calm confidence she entered with. Not a word to Evelyn Shaw, not a glance back. Because some victories don't need to be declared, they just are. Outside, the evening air was cooler, the sounds of the gala muffled behind tall glass doors. Norah stood on the sidewalk, the streetlights casting a soft glow across her face. She looked at peace. Her driver pulled up a moment later, but before she opened the door, a voice called out, "Miss Ellison?" She turned. It was a young woman, maybe in her late 20s, dressed plainly, holding a worn leather notebook. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said. "I work at one of the community centers that uses your literacy curriculum. I recognized you the moment you walked in, but when I saw how they treated you, I almost said something I didn't." Norah smiled gently. "You didn't need to," she replied. "People don't always remember who speaks first. They remember who stood tall when it counted." The woman's eyes welled. "You gave them everything without shouting. That takes more strength than anything I've seen inside that ballroom." Norah touched her arm. "Then use your voice to lift someone else next time. We rise better together." They exchanged no business cards, no photos, no hashtags. Just a look. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The next morning, the event photos hit the social circuit, but the headline wasn't Evelyn's dress. It wasn't the meal or the decor or the celebrity auction. It was, "Who was that woman?" Norah Ellison's 10 minutes of truth leaves a room full of millionaires speechless. Comments flooded in. "She said everything I've always wanted to say in rooms I've never been invited to. Dignity is louder than any microphone. Reminds me not to judge by first impressions ever again." And somewhere in a quiet apartment, a single mother on her third job clicked like and whispered, "Thank you." Greatness doesn't always come with lights or a loud voice. Sometimes it walks in wearing old heels and speaks only when it has something that truly matters to say. Norah didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. They laughed when she entered. They stood when she left. If this story moved you, if you've ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, remember this. You don't need to match the room. Sometimes you were meant to change it. Drop A in the comments if you've ever been underestimated, and prove them wrong in your own quiet way. And if you know someone who carries dignity like armor, who shows up even when the world tells them not to share this with them, let them know they're not invisible. Because the world doesn't need more noise, it needs more Norah Ellisons.